Welcome to the 83rd episode of the Hail Married podcast. I'm A. Toves, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to recap our frustrating loss to Texas State. Let's get started.
For a second week in a row, I'm glad you're not doing a recap of this game because this was hard to watch. I was watching in Vegas at a pool bar on my phone because I was with my friends. It was the NFL first week, so thought we'd make it a kind of guys trip. And while I was happy to be around my friends, I was having a hard time watching this game. And you were here in San Antonio, and I just can't imagine how you were reacting just by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I had actually thought about going to the game and just meeting up with some people there, and I'm kind of glad I didn't make that decision because it was hard to watch on TV. Like, I can't imagine how hard it was to watch in the stands.
Well, I mean, you know, there's not a lot of UTSA fans that traveled, and for me, I really wasn't going to go to the game anyway because, for me personally, I just didn't find it enjoyable, or the thought of it didn't sound enjoyable to be like in, 95 to 100 degree weather, just basking in the sun. Maybe it's because I'm getting old.
I feel like that daytime game in Baylor just kind of ruined those.
Yes.
The 2019 game.
Yes.
Kind of ruined those games for us. And who knew that the outcome was going to feel like that 2019 Baylor game?
That's a really great point because I just there's even this Texas game coming up, is kind of early evening. And maybe the weather is a little better, but I still, there's just something about being outdoors. It's the dome that has spoiled me too. But
sure.
That Baylor game, you're right. It was in the middle of the day, and I just never want to go back to games like that. It just sucks. But I mean, Texas State did something that we didn't think they would do.
Yeah, I mean, look, we knew in the back of our mind that there was a real possibility that they were going to win this game.
Right.
And I said I couldn't predict a Texas State win. I just couldn't say the words out loud on the podcast. I certainly was not expecting Texas State to just punch us in the mouth. And it kind of felt to me like, when you think about it, like if you're, the big brother to your little brother, and you're kind of like, maybe bullying them and like pushing at them and, like you're not good enough, you're not strong enough. It's not a rivalry because you can't beat me. Like we just poked at them so much that finally they just came back and like, man, they landed that sucker punch and just knocked us out.
I think we drove them to that. And I think we deserved that beating because of just that ridicule. And you don't have to have been, for these football players, you don't have to be at the school for 4 years to not like UTSA. And it was clear because a
lot of these guys are transfers. They didn't really have all of that history, but man.
I mean, the way GJ Kinney constructed this roster, you were surprised and like had contacted me about the presser, and you were like, he said some things that I wasn't ready for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you haven't listened to his comments, they're on the Texas State website. You should listen to him. It was really interesting because he said they have been working year-round on prep for this game. Like, if you listen to Trailer, any of our guys, it's like, we take one game at a time. We're not looking ahead. This is another game on our schedule.
Yeah.
GJ said, no, we have been working for a year on game planning for UTSA. Every personnel decision that they made in the offseason, they ask, does this allow us to beat UTSA? I mean, that is just a whole other level of taking this rivalry, to the next step than I think what we really were prepared for, and listen, I think it's a bold strategy that he put all of that effort into this one game. And, I just kept thinking about that dodgeball reference. Bold strategy, Cotton. Hope that pays off for you because there's a risk in putting so much time and effort into this one game when you have all of these other games that you have to win to make it to a bowl, to make it to a championship game, to be in that conference championship playoff picture. But I mean, he literally said they have been game planning. They held things back on tape from that Lamar game because they wanted to be able to surprise UTSA. Like, they just, Kenny, the players, man, they took this rivalry to the next step.
They did. And I think, just looking at what he had said, I know it sounds surprising, but I feel like that's what was needed for Texas State to finally win.
Sure.
They needed to do that. And they aimed for the top of the G5 because as UTSA fans, we see our UTSA team, and we've been told by pundits that UTSA is one of the top G5 teams. So why wouldn't you try to either emulate or be better than the team south of you that has been bullying you around? And I got to tell you, it tells me that Kenny last year really thought that they should have won that game.
Yeah.
And when I watched that game, I think that Texas State should have won in the Dome last year. I love this, though. I love this because welcome to the rivalry, Texas State. Like, you've been talking trash before, and I'm talking about the fans now, but this really makes it much more serious and it makes it much more fun.
And it'll be interesting to see how Traylor responds to this next year because, he really underestimated Kenny, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And he has tried to downplay the thought of a rivalry. Again, it's another game on the schedule. It's for the fans. It's for the media to talk about. That's not how we look at it. I mean, these are things we've heard him say. And I think he's treated maybe the North Texas game a little bit different. Like, it seems like he's admitted at times that that's a rivalry. Probably partially because there was obviously this, like, I don't want to say hate, but, it was clear that there was this distaste for Seth Luttrell. Yeah. But he has just really downplayed the Texas State rivalry. He's downplayed it even before Kenny was there. And, I mean, can you just imagine if, like, Sark was on a press conference and said, oh, the Red River Shootout, like, that's just another game on the schedule. Like, we're not rivals with Oklahoma. I mean, can you just imagine, like, the meltdown from Texas fans?
Oh, absolutely. And then how much Oklahoma would also take offense to it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they'd be like, oh, wait a minute. You don't see us as rivals, yet we've beaten you,
right.
Put whatever in there. But it really reminded me back when Jim Tressel was announced as a Ohio State coach back, I think it was 2000, 2001. And he was introduced to the Ohio State fans at a basketball game. And he wasn't expecting to speak, but they gave him the mic, and he just goes ad lib. You can be proud of our players in the community. You can be proud of our players everywhere. You're going to be proud of this program, but you're especially going to be proud in 310 days in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when we take on Michigan. That's rivalry. That's what makes college football so fun. And I think for me, the fact that GJ Kinney was able to come and outright say it, and then for Traylor to also downplay it, this now gets interesting in terms of this series with Texas
in the future.
State.
Yeah, because we are playing them consistently until I think it's 2031,
right,
where we haven't necessarily done that in the past. And look, I don't want him to become that coach who is like Kenny and says every decision I make is about this game, because look, I've watched Iowa State for years, and there were coaches in the past that, man, they could win that Iowa game, but they couldn't do anything else for the rest of the season. And that prolonged their life for a bit. But I don't want to get to that point where it's like, well, we only win the Texas State game.
Well, yeah, that's fair. I think the reason he won't do it, though, and I'm talking about Traylor here, the reason he won't do it is because he hasn't been the little brother. Yeah. He's been the one kicking the guy around. So he's not going to do that. He's going to aim higher in terms of where he sees his program to go. But I think it just it gives the juice now that Texas State really cares, right? Because before, I mean, sure, you could point at any of the other sports that we played Texas State in,
Yeah.
but it didn't feel like a rivalry on the football field.
Right.
And what I think we really enjoy now is the thought, I guess, I shouldn't say the fact, the thought of Texas State and UTSA continuing on this rise and continuing to have really good teams here in South Texas, because they're really the only Division I teams here in this area.
Yeah.
I mean, I know UT is not far away, but we're not at their level. But this would be fun for.
I mean, we're less than an hour away from each other.
It would just be fun for this to continue to just elevate. And
Yeah.
I love that the series now gets better and gets a little juicier, right? Because
Pettier.
yeah,
It's gonna get petty.
let's hope so. Let's hope so, because I think that'll just make the rivalry much more fun. And I think, it's just, there's a lot of pieces to rivalries. Like I said, that's what makes college football fun. But
Yeah.
what I love about it is just the thought of we finally have teams putting what honestly does feel like they're putting their crosshairs on us.
Oh yeah.
I think before that was happening, but someone actually came out and said it, and it was
Yeah.
our rival. And
Yeah.
this is great.
And a couple of things to think about. First of all, we don't know that we're going to be playing North Texas every year like we have in the past because of the
Right.
American schedule. So we've acknowledged that North Texas is a rival. Trailers acknowledge it's a rival, but we don't know that we're going to have that game on our schedule consistently after next year. And the other thing to think about is, there's just, again, that fun kind of pettiness that has come from North Texas, right? I mean, they went out, stole our Taco Palenque mascot, and hid it at one point before.
Oh, during a game. Yeah.
During
yeah,
a game.
Yeah.
There was like them squabbling, with our their coaches squabbling with our players, and now that it also was all tied to Seth Luttrell, and he's gone. So you kind of wonder, like, is the North Texas rivalry going to cool with Eric Morris, and is it going to cool with this, like, maybe not being every year? So it's nice to have this Texas State rivalry heat up and kind of replace that.
Absolutely. I mean, Texas State is a very talented team. I think we saw exactly what Kenny did. He brought in the right guys. He's got the right system. I'll leave you with this thought. If he doesn't stay, how much does this rivalry not brew, I guess?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Hopefully Kenny stays a little bit longer and this rivalry gets a little chippier because, like we said, because it's gotten really fun.
Yeah, I'm torn between that. Like, it would be fun to have him, stay for a couple more years, but then it also would be fun to have him maybe take some of those jobs that we're all sweating trailer taking,
That's true. All right, let's turn our attention to UTSA. I thought it was interesting that they kind of had talked about college football playoff aspirations. This kind of came up, and it has come up with many of the fans and stuff like that. I get it. I mean, if you're trying to be a homer or whatever, the opportunity is there, but there's a lot that has to go right with that. But I did think it was interesting that we really thought that this was the year when we're transitioning a quarterback in, when there's other key positions that we're kind of revamping, i.e. the offensive line, which we'll get into later. I just never saw UT potentially in the future being that upset that, like, Northern Illinois kind of did to Notre Dame this past weekend. Like, I never saw it. So, I never mentioned it in the season preview because I just didn't want to sound too negative, because I felt like, well, I guess I'm negative. But
right.
Let's be honest, like, him bringing that up to me, I got to ask you, like, what are your thoughts? Like, why would he have done that? And now, like, it just seems like it's deflated the team because of it.
Yeah, I mean, given the fact that we've seen really a poor showing from the team, one where, we're questioning a lot of things about the culture, their mental toughness, the coaches and their preparation, you go back and you look at those discussions and think, gosh, that's not something that Traylor typically does. He typically would have come back with his little coach speak answer about, oh, it's a culture pillar violation.
Right.
And we take one game at a time and, whatever. But on the other hand, he was trying to do something different this year because he said, look, I've had these slow starts in the past. We didn't start last season the way that we wanted to. We finished well. And he's talked about just really having built even in high school, that's kind of how he built his teams, right? He started off slow and then he built to success. But he wanted to do something differently this year. He wanted to have a fast start. He knew how important that was. And so I don't know if he thought maybe like entertaining this conversation was going to somehow motivate the team. But I think what it really did is it set these unrealistic expectations in the minds of fans. And then you heard him try to like backpedal, like, oh, this team's really good. And oh, we're transitioning. And oh, we have a new quarterback. And it was almost like, then kind of set up some of those tweets we saw afterwards that were just cringy. Like, well, Jeff's been trying to warn us about how great these other teams are. It's like, is he? Because on the other hand, he was talking about college football playoff expectations.
Right.
I felt like he played into what he clearly knew was an unrealistic expectation because he sees this team every single day on the field. He had to know that this was a possibility.
That's an interesting statement because I wonder what got him caught up in it.
Yeah.
What was it? Just him talking with people all of a sudden and just feeling like, yeah, this is exactly what I see as well. It doesn't matter if you feel that way. I would have preferred him just to give the coach speak and just say,
yeah,
look, it's like you said, cultural violation, and we have to get through some teams before we even start entertaining that. And it would have irritated us probably.
Sure.
But I think for the casual UTSA fan and for maybe just some of the fringe UTSA fans that are kind of really out there and extreme homers, this wouldn't feel as, I guess, deflating for the season now. Because it feels like now there's sort of this loss of almost interest for UTSA when I don't think we'll get to it in a second here, but it just seems like it's not right. It doesn't feel justified to get so upset about it. But
well, I think the perplexing thing is, if you look back to the way that he reacted last season after the Houston loss and the Army loss, like he just really seemed like he was distraught. And this season, after talking about, oh, we're a college playoff, contender, and we lose in a dramatic fashion, like he didn't have that same kind of response after the post-game presser.
Sure.
And I know a lot of people were like really disappointed by that and they wanted him to be, more emotional, but man, I don't want to go back to the Houston and Army days of last year when like Traylor acted like he just got kicked in the nards, right before he went in the press conference. It was like, man, I mean, like he was so down. He didn't seem like he had a plan. I wasn't sure if I needed to like hug him or slap him or what.
Sure.
So, I don't want to go back to that either, but I think people are just kind of perplexed by the things that he has said this season and the way that he's reacted. And I think they just don't know what to make of him. And when you hear him say things like, well, it's on me, if I don't have the team ready, it starts with me,
right,
the head coach.
Right. Then,
okay, well, what are we supposed to think about you? What's the plan? Where's your culture in all of this?
Right. I struggle with a lot of the stuff. I think, obviously he kind of mimics a little bit of, you talked about earlier, those slow starts. I mean, really the slow start was last year, and he just didn't react well. And like you said, maybe he's trying something different this year. We talked about in the offseason how his tone seemed to change and some of the things had changed. So I think based off this season so far and how Traylor has answered some of these questions year after year, my question to you is, does Traylor truly believe in the triangle of toughness?
There are moments when I really question how he feels about this culture that he created and whether he really still buys into it. Because when I hear him say things like, well, I don't know if we should do the single digits again, but the team seemed to want it. It just makes me wonder, like, how bought in he really is, because you're the one who introduced the single digits. And you're the one who laid the groundwork for the 2-0 and how important that is. And then to hear you say, oh, I questioned whether or not I should do it. Like,
So
I mean, it's perplexing.
yeah, it's interesting because I went back and looked at when he first brought this up as a thing, right? Like this is our brand, this is how we're going to do things, our culture. And he talked about like players having to battle for these single digits, and he said there's going to be hurt feelings, but that's good, that's life.
Right.
But then you hear him now and like afterwards in the last few years, and he's like, well, I don't know, it just seems like some guys are really want it, but you know, I feel bad making those calls. Those are terrible calls. Yeah, but that's life. You said it yourself back in 2020. So what has been that change? Like to your point,
I mean,
it's been that change, right? Like he questioning this, and
it's either a situation where, maybe he's just gotten too emotionally attached to these guys. And so, it was easy to make those tough calls the first year, maybe the second year, because he was still getting to know this team. They weren't all his recruits.
Yeah.
They were, it was just different. And now that these are his guys and they're bought into him, like
they love him. Yes.
Yeah, like that emotional connection is hard. Like that could be one part of it. I mean, the other part of it could just be, look, maybe this worked out in 2020, 2021, and even 2022 because you still had a team that was made up largely of guys who lived through 2017 when we were supposed to have all of these great expectations. We made a bowl, or we were bowl eligible, but we didn't make it to a bowl.
Right.
2018 when things just started to go off the rails, and then 2019 when again they derailed. And they remember how, people were losing faith in them as players, losing faith in the program.
Right.
The attendance really just decreased. Maybe it was the fact that those guys remembered how bad it could be and were just really kind of bought into like, hey, this is something we can rally around, and we have a chip on our shoulder and we've got to work through that. And now we either have a situation of complacency where you've got guys that have only known a winning program,
right,
or you have a situation where maybe it just doesn't resonate in the same way. I don't know.
So we were told by someone close to the program that if you look behind the curtain, you wonder how the football team won any games. I think that's more of a reflection in the last couple years. Yeah. I think those were where the cracks really were at. But I think going back to what you said in terms of complacency, struggling to actually now be the hunted as opposed to the hunter also changes you, right? Because you've come off, like last year, you came off 2 conference championship seasons, and now all of a sudden
you're supposed to take the American by storm.
Right. And so you also don't have those super seniors or those, big time veterans that you clearly benefited from in 2020, 2021, 2022, stuff like that, right?
Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, I think he questions his I think desire for that culture so much that I think from my point of view, sometimes I do question whether he wants to go back to that, whether he still loves this or not. And I think as we've talked about it right now, I still question whether this is really what he still stands for, the triangle of toughness, because I think over the last 2 seasons now, and I mean, the season really has only been 2 games, you've seen the cracks in what some of the pillars are, some of the selfless, perfect effort. Like you didn't really see that on Saturday, in my opinion. You certainly didn't see a passion, and I think mental and physical toughness. I think the mental toughness, is much more important than the physical toughness, because the mental toughness, I think, at times has wavered with this team. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be something I think that we need to keep an eye on as the season goes, because the way this game went, I don't know. I mean,
I feel like we said the same thing last year at the same time. Like,
we did.
When things are bad, you have to go back to your culture. You have to rely on your culture. And they managed to turn it around last year. So,
okay. So to wrap this intro part up, because we've gone a little while here, where are you on this team right now after that big loss to Texas State?
I mean, listen, I know we've talked a lot about the challenges. It's not all doom and gloom. It really isn't. They weathered this storm last season. They can weather the storm again. Yeah, next week is not going to be any better because we're playing Texas.
What?
Let's
What do
just
you mean?
get that out. But the week after that, we have Houston Christian. And I watched their game against Tarleton. We'll rebound. We'll be okay. Honestly, I don't know that we're going to know a whole lot about this team until we get to that ECU game. But there's not any reason to, start burning your jerseys or burning your trailer bobbleheads. Like, there is a test of how the season will go, and there's a lot on trailer shoulders, and there's a lot on this team to see if they can turn it around. But it's certainly possible that we could make a run and be in the exact same spot we expected to be in at the end of the season with a 9-3 record.
Fair enough. I think I will say this. To me, it depends on the 2-1-0 single digits.
Yeah.
I think the 6 of those players need to stand up and just see how they can motivate this team moving forward. And they may need help from Coach Traylor because
they will. Yeah.
I think that I knew there would be a leadership void. I mean, it was hard. It's hard to lose a leader like Frank Harris. I mean, I know a lot of people have talked about Rashad Wisdom, but to me, Frank Harris was leadership, like the embodiment of leadership. And I think it's hard to lose such a great leader like that and not see a lull from a business, a team, whoever it is, right? So I'm not down on this team yet. I'm disappointed by the loss. I mean, obviously there's a lot of frustrating things, and we'll get to here in just a second. But yeah, I mean, let's see how the rest of September goes, and then we'll see if we were wrong, if we whiffed or anything. So let's start with the offense, keys to the game. Keep Ben Bell away from Owen. Well, Bell had 1 sack and 3 hurries. I know that it was said that they didn't have that Texas State didn't sack any of our quarterbacks, but under the official stats, it showed 2 sacks, one of them being Ben Bell, like I just said. And Texas State also had 11 hurries overall. So they were getting to our quarterbacks, and you don't want to be seeing that. I mean, obviously it's going to affect it, and obviously issues with the O-line, which we're about to talk about. But the other key was to establish the run game, and 30 rushes for 66 yards for an average of 2.2 yards. Not going to get it done. Absolutely not going to get it done against a really good Texas State team overall and just really good defense. I think what Kenny did in withholding a lot of their playbook on all 3 phases of the game certainly affected this UTSA team. But more than that, I don't think it's hard to scheme anything when your offensive line is just broken right now.
Yeah.
We said that last year too. That's one of the things that we had some problems with. And I'm not sure there's anything that can be done immediately. Like, I don't think you can say, well, you just replace the starter or this one guy when he gets healthy. Ooh, watch out.
Yeah.
I just think that they're struggling to figure out what their roles are. And, I also may have whiffed on this being when I said it was the best offensive line in UTSA history. I think there's talent. And
Sure.
I think if you just look on paper, it is. But their struggles are affecting the run and pass game. And to me, there's nothing you can do with that. I mean, there's a little bit you can do.
Well, you can't do anything quickly.
Right. It's a larger problem that you have to fix. And this is a question I want to ask you because it just popped up as I was talking about that, but I'll leave it for a little bit later because I want to say this. It certainly feels now that there's a lack of trust between Owen and the offensive line because he hasn't looked as comfortable in the pocket as he did at the beginning of the Kennesaw game.
Right.
Kennesaw in the second quarter seemed to affect him. And I don't know. I mean, I thought he'd be okay in the Texas State heat, right? Like, I just felt like he's going to show how cool he is. And that really wasn't the case. And I'm now worried about Owen and his progress because if this O-line kind of continues to struggle, it could affect his trajectory. So
Yeah. I mean, he certainly is. hearing footsteps, whether they're real or not.
Right.
It's clear that he doesn't have faith that the O-line is going to protect him. And so he's thinking, man, I got to get this ball out quickly. And he's getting rushed and not making the best decisions.
Or letting plays develop. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? And I think when I look back and compare some of the stats that Owen had now with what Frank had early in his career, there's a lot of similarities. And we were looking back, and I was looking back at some notes, and even some old notes from like that I had just apparently saved in 2019, and it was, wow, Frank maybe at times gets rushed in his, in getting a play or getting a play going, or getting the ball out, or everything that we're talking about Owen.
Right.
That's what I saw in Frank early on, and so if we were patient with Frank, I guess we need to be patient here with Owen. But I'm concerned because I just feel like this O-line may eventually cause him to continue to hear those fake footsteps as you talked about. And I don't know how he rebounds from it. I think he's good enough to rebound from it, but obviously we'll see. But for all those that are calling for Eddie Lee, he's not going to solve the issues. Like it's this OL that I think needs to get fixed first, and then we can start talking about if Eddie goes out there and does perform much better than Owen, then we can talk about like a quarterback change. Mm-hmm. But I would say
I think it's premature. Yeah,
it is premature. But are we really gonna hope like we'd have to fix our quarterback issue at the end of the season? Like I don't know. I hesitate with that because you're seeing a bunch of problems on offense. Obviously, the running backs aren't getting the holes. You're seeing tight ends and wide receivers that are struggling. And to me, the wide receivers I had concerns with in our season preview. I said, I'm not sure that they have the hands. Like mm-hmm. We've seen great hands from the big three for the longest time. And are we going to get spoiled with that? Because we got spoiled with Frank at quarterback. We got spoiled with some things that Rashad did on defense. It feels like the questions are still there and they still haven't answered any of those. I don't want to rehash too many of the plays. There was plenty of plays that I think the wide receivers could have made. So let me ask you this. So from what we've seen so far from UTSA fans' reaction that offensive changes are needed, what if this team goes on a run like you referenced earlier? They end up 9-3 like last season. What constitutes a need for offensive change to Coach Traylor?
Yeah, I think that's where it gets really complicated. And we, I love to use my Iowa references, right? That makes me start thinking about Iowa Hawkeyes and, all of the frustrations they had with their offensive coordinator. And, it's like Kurt Ferenz did not want to fire his son because, man, they were still winning. They were still in the conference discussions, right? It wasn't pretty. It wasn't based on their offense, but man, how do you make that change when at the end of the day, your record still shows success? So I don't know. I mean, maybe Traylor's Kirk Ferenz 2.0.
You said it.
That's right.
Sure, I set you up for it, but wow.
Are you listening, Dr. Campos? Just saying.
Wow. That's
I mean, I'm not saying that that's necessarily
no, you're
what's
right.
Happen,
you're right.
But
and I don't think it's as bad as Iowa, but
not yet. No.
What a shot. I mean, I think there's something there to what you're saying, and I love you taking that shot because I think it is something to think about as the season progresses. So let's go to the special teams. Obviously, really struggled on the punts. You had told me via text. There's obviously they're having problems punting into the wind, and they had pulled Kale because of cramping. I went back and I've heard, fans say, well, our punters hasn't been very good. Okay, well, his name is Cale Hogan, and he's Australian. And if you're comparing him to Lucas Dean last year, it's unfair. So I went back and I looked at Lucas Dean's first two games and looked at Cale's first two games. Cale right now is averaging 37.4 yards per punt. He's had 12 punts so far. Lucas Dean in his first season, which was 2019, he averaged 41.3 yards per punt, and he had 11 punts. Very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's two offensives that have struggled, and we've had to see more of Lucas and Kale than we have wanted to.
I think we
But
all
can you?
probably like just erase 2019 from our memory. So everything about Lucas was, him being this weapon.
Right. Everything was about how great he was, right? But I just wanted to remind you and everyone else, like, we're talking about 4 yards. That's what we're talking about. I feel like now I'm going on that rant of Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice. We're talking about 4 yards. I I get it, but again, I think we've seen this level of excellence from certain areas, and now we're not seeing it. And I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Should they go to? I mean, Chase Allen had a really good punt. So, what do you think? Should there be a change at punter?
I think obviously you're going to have to give him a little more leeway. Like, you can't just pull him this quickly unless you really see something fabulous from Chase Allen. But, the risk with Chase doing double duty, is he struggled on field goals. So are we going to just I don't know, maybe we'll just make a little triangle change there, right? Like, maybe Kale can do kickoffs, Tate can do field goals, I don't know.
We're talking about our punter at this point.
We
How
are.
bad was it that we pulled our quarterback, probably pulled some starters in the defense, and then pulled our punter? Like, I just can't feel angry on this pod. I just have to kind of laugh it off because that's just how bad things got on Saturday. We pulled our punter.
Yeah.
It's. I will say here's the bright spot for the special teams. Tate Sandell.
That's right.
Your boy continued to get touchbacks, and he didn't really have too many opportunities. But, I mean, you have to look at bright spots. You have to do what you can. So, in saying that, let's talk about the defense a little bit. The keys for the defense were bottle up Ishmati. He used 9 carries for 26 yards. He did have 4 catches for 56 yards with a long of, a 37-yard reception. We didn't think Lincoln Perry was going to go off.
I know. Yeah. I mean, they understood the assignment with Mahdi. They just kind of forgot about the other guy.
But I mean, Mahdi was so dangerous, and I think they did a good job of zeroing in on him. That, and then we'll get into it here in a second. But we just also didn't create turnovers. Well, we did. I mean, that
We got one.
Early on, we got the Davison tip to Morris for an interception. Offense didn't do anything with it. And then early in the game on a goal line, essentially, or at least close to the goal line. I mean, we're talking within the 5-yard line. We stop him on downs. Another turnover. And I mean, I know it's not going to count in the stat sheet as a turnover, but that was big. And, you thought that the defense was really going to keep us in this game somehow. But, I really did feel like Jordan McLeod, as much as I said, I'm not sure about him, it was clear that he was at times too comfortable running the offense. And that said, TJ Finley seemed like a good quarterback for them. And you scratch your head. But then you talked about GJ Kinney going back and saying, which guy helps us beat UTSA? Jordan McLeod, is it?
Yeah. And just another note on GJ, I think one of the things that will be interesting to kind of see long term how this goes is, he built his roster this year with a lot of transfers who have 1, maybe 2 years of eligibility, and including Jordan McLeod, right? He's great. He's fabulous. They got 1 year out of him. So hopefully they make everything, they get everything that they can out of him this year. One of the questions I think is really how sustainable is that going to be? He's built this roster for 1 year. He's going to have to rebuild it for 1 year. He's going to have to rebuild it for 1 year. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that plays out long term.
And if he stays long term, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of covered that already, but yeah, if he's not staying long term, it gets interesting again. Like I brought up before, does the next Texas State coach continue this level of success?
Right.
I'm just gonna say this for the defense. I hope they hold their heads up high and keep it above water. Because the offense is struggling, and right now they're going to be the answer, and it's going to be tough because look, they're not perfect, and they need some help from that offensive side of the ball. But I just don't want them to get utterly frustrated
Right.
and like kind of start giving up because
Yeah.
they're going to go through some more tough times, especially this coming Saturday. And I gotta say, I appreciate you. We got through this not being as negative as I thought we would be. I felt like we might be negative as we wrote down our notes, and we
Yeah.
started kind of talking. But as we talked through it, you gave me some good ones, like we got kicked in the nards and some other pieces. So, yeah, we're both frustrated over this, but I think therapy helped.
That's right.
All right, with that, let's get to the short Texas preview because is there really anything that we need to talk about them? Because, and I'll say this, here's why I'm saying this is because Texas is not really somebody that we're going to be up against routinely in terms of level of play.
I mean, this is going to be the true body bag game. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, it
we are playing
is.
This game for money.
Yeah.
They are number 2. Like, we are just hoping that we can take our bag back to San Antonio and, like, get on the bus without any major injuries.
Texas has built themselves quite a program. They hired the right coach, much like UTSA did. And Steve Sarkisian, while he's made mistakes, look, the guy has found a way to put a bunch of talent here. And we're going into Texas playing the highest ranked team that UTSA has ever played. As you mentioned, they're number 2.
Yeah.
So
it's impressive to see the turnaround that Texas has had in the last 2 years.
Well, and that's what I think. That's what I was going to say was 2022 was our best chance to like really give them that run, and it was fun while it lasted. But you saw how they overcame us and essentially kind of blew us out. There's just no way that we stay competitive in this one because let's start with the offense. Quinn Ewers. Good gosh, he's a terrific quarterback. Like, there were some questions early on about him when he went to Ohio State. I mean, I think he made a mistake. I think he should have come to UT, but maybe he was just waiting for Steve Sarkisian to show up here. And he's shown up, and I think he's the right coach, and he's got the right quarterback. I mean, Ewers last year, they struggled at times when he wasn't in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And then this season, I just felt like he's peaking just like he should, and he's going to be a high draft pick. And UT has not had that from a quarterback in a long time.
Right.
So I'm going to say this. Best case would be that we see Arch Manning come in like in the second half. And worst case is probably the second quarter. Like, this is a really good offense. And I'm trying to keep it together as we go through this. And the reason I'm trying to keep it together is because, look, it just feels like you look at any of the positions and you're like, you're so loaded. Like it's like when you used to play like the old school NCAA college football game and you just had a whole bunch of great recruits and you're like, I've got 5 stars everywhere. I mean, it feels like that's what UT has. I mean, they got some good transfer wide receivers in Isaiah Bond, who was at Alabama last season, and Matthew Golden, who's at Houston. We played last season.
Yeah, I completely forgot that Matthew Golden had been at Houston and wasn't at UT when we played them before. I literally wrote down in my notes, oh, and Matthew Golden's back at wide receiver. And then I realized, like, no, he's not back. We're facing him again, just at a different school. Like, whatever.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, let's get to the defense. And I think there's a familiar name that comes up. And I'm just going to use an MC Hammer album reference. Please, Trey Moore, don't hurt him. Because I don't want him hurting our quarterbacks. I don't want him hurting any of our players. And I'm not saying that he would. Like, he's not trying to do that intentionally. And let's hope that, like, none of their defensive players don't do it either. Again, not intentional. It's just the way the offensive line has looked.
Yeah, I mean it's a real question mark, right, with the way that we've played so far.
Well, let me tell you this, because Traylor said that it seemed, well, I don't remember if Traylor said it, but it seemed like he kind of alluded to the fact that they kind of struggled with some of Texas State's speed on defense. What are you going to do against UT? Like,
Right.
if you thought that was kind of fast to adjust to, I mean, UT's just even incredibly faster. So, I don't know. That's why I'm like, please just don't hurt our guys. Like, let's just get out of this healthy. You want to talk about special teams real quick? Because it sounds like there's a familiar name there.
Matt Golden. I don't think he's a kick returner for UT. I don't think he played that role at Houston, but yeah, so look out for him. Obviously, he has great hands and good speed.
All right, let's get to the keys to victory. There's one. I want UTSA to show me mental toughness for 4 quarters. They haven't done it this year so far.
Yeah.
Not as completely as a team. They have not done it. So I want to see that. I want to see them go out there, and I think that's the first step in fixing a lot of these problems.
Yeah, it's not just a key to victory in this game. It really is a key to turning the season around.
Great point. I think that's a very great point. All right. Do you want to go first for the Hail Mary predictions?
Sure. I mean, I'd love to sound optimistic about this game. Obviously, I'm concerned about the mindset of the team and the coaching staff, frankly, right now. I just want them, like I said in tongue-in-cheek earlier, I want us to walk away from this game without serious injury so that we can prepare for the games to come and really the conference schedule.
Right.
Because at this point, that's what matters the most. I do think that we have an opportunity, as crazy as that sounds, to score more points in this game than we did against Texas State. The reason for that is because I do think that Stark is probably going to let up on the gas, where Kenny was like, nope, not going to do it. So my prediction for the score is Texas 45, UTSA 17.
At this point, I don't know what to make of this UTSA team. I know it's a talented team, as I said before. But I think we're going to know very little about the team come the end of September. I know that the sky hasn't fallen, as we talked about before. But going up against a great UT squad, a playoff squad,
yeah,
could change things should UTSA not be mentally tough, as we talked about here as a key. So give me the Horns 55-13 over UTSA.
All right, before we go, let's talk about UTSA soccer.
A winning program. Sorry, just kidding.
They played Central Arkansas this past weekend. We both watched the game. They won 3-0, so now they've improved to 5-2 on the season. You know, I know that Central Arkansas is not necessarily a high-level competitor. I mean, we have, much like our previous discussions with Texas State, I think we've beat Central Arkansas all 5 times that we've played them.
Right.
But I thought it was really impressive to see the team come out and to score 3 goals, because they started off kind of lackluster, and there's been so many questions about offensive challenges again. You know, we haven't scored more than 2 games in any of our previous wins. So to see them really kind of come to life and get 2 goals back to back within like 90 seconds of each other, that was just really impressive. And I hope that they build upon this game and kind of take that confidence into conference play.
Well, I think we're finally starting to see some of the frustrations we had early in the season, which was, you know, some of those crosses weren't getting to the players. Mm-hmm. They were errant. So, you know, they were kind of going all over the place into the penalty box area. And, you know, you had players kind of trying to adjust and figure out, like, where's this ball's like 10 yards in front of me. There's no way I'm going to get to it. So, you know, there was a really nice, that second goal that you're talking about, like, was it 90 seconds later by Addie Johnson? It was a very nice cross into the box into her, and she just laid in a nice header. Her first goal was a great shot to the corner of the goal. So, you know, it's encouraging to see a freshman like her, you know, come in and provide that offensive spark. But as I said before, there's been so many injuries to this team that you needed these girls to step up, these young players to step up. And it's unfortunate that you have to have them step up so soon, but it doesn't matter the competition. It's just good to see them come in and and have some positive play, because that gives them the confidence, and that's just going to help the team as they go and start getting prepared for conference. But our girl Sasha Dade
Yeah.
scored a goal in the second half. It's her first goal of the season, and you know she always has this knack, especially off of set pieces, to just
Be in the right spot.
yeah, be in the right spot and get a nice shot on goal, and she did. And she scores again. She's been very good at scoring the last couple seasons. But there was a surprise you had.
Yeah. So I'm listening to the announcer talk, and he said, Addie Johnson scored 2 goals in the game. And that was the first time outside of exhibition, the first time that 2 goals had been scored by the same player. If you go back to all of the other games that we've played so far, there's been 8 different girls who have scored 1 goal. So I just thought that was amazing because, and I went back and had to fact check him, because we've talked about kind of these offensive struggles, and it just surprised me that there were that many different players that had scored goals, and that this was the first time that you had someone scoring a second goal, not just in the game, but in the season.
Yeah, and that's one of the things from the I would say the Pittman era that's been, I think, just a staple of it, is that he's always had, like, because of his style of play and the way he carries the offense, or like has set up the offense, you do get a lot of different players touching the ball and a lot of players being put in an offensive position. And it's really cool to see them come through at certain times. So the fact that we've had that many goal scorers, I think would, for a casual fan, would be like, why don't we have like just a main scorer? Why don't we have one to rely on? And sure, I totally understand that. But I think this approach really makes UTSA more dangerous, because I love the fact that Sasha Dade is a defender and she scored a goal, and
Right.
she scores goals, right? Like, and obviously it's off set pieces, but still it's that threat of any of these girls could potentially score.
Yeah.
That to me makes it so much more difficult to prepare for, because you're not worrying about this one girl in the front of the offense.
Yeah.
You're worrying about all these girls that could find ways to make moves to get past the opposing defense and get really good shots on goal. So I think we're seeing a lot better shot selection, a lot better, more shots on target. And again, like I said last week, I wasn't prepared for the team to have seemed a little bit sluggish early in the season. I mean, obviously you understand it. Like, I wasn't trying to be negative there, but just positive to see them continue to grow.
Yeah, and to be fair, if we do count the exhibition, Bree Carrington has had 2 goals. She scored in the exhibition, and then she scored in the Houston game. So, there are 2 girls, if you count exhibition, that have had 2 goals. But still, it's just, like you said, it's pretty impressive that we have so many different options. Conference play starts this Thursday against UAB, 7 p.m. at home. And if you're not able to watch it, or if you're not able to get out to Park West, you can watch it on ESPN Plus.
Should be a fun game. UAB's has been a pretty good program over the years, and I think they still are. So, yeah, let's get ready. Let's hope that we get some of our injured players back for that game. Before we move on, though, I do want to make sure that we give some good props to Addie Johnson. We mentioned her 2 goals. She was the freshman of the week for the AAC, and Sasha Dade made honorable mention. I think player of the week or honorable mention for AAC this week. So, again, it's our goal scorers, but still, it doesn't matter the competition. The fact that they're getting lauded, man, let's keep this going. I'm really excited to see how this soccer team continues to grow.
Yeah, men's and women's basketball also released their non-conference schedule.
Yes.
The women, I mean, I think the big names that will jump out to you, they're playing Texas A&M and Stanford. They also did confirm their Puerto Rico Thanksgiving trip, so they'll have 2 games in Puerto Rico over the Thanksgiving weekend.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Going to be just a really good opportunity in Puerto Rico, and that Stanford game is obviously a homecoming for Sienna Gudadaro, who's one of our, I think she's now a junior guard. Coach Aston does a great job of finding those games too, especially for those players that live further away from San Antonio, and just find some of those games to play away from home. So just so they can play in front of their family and friends. So awesome.
On the men's side, the name that will probably stick out to you in terms of their schedule is Arkansas, but the one that you might not recognize, but we should probably talk about as being an interesting competitor is St. Mary's from California.
Right, because St. Mary's, California, in the last 3 seasons has been making NCAA tournament appearances. They're out of the West Coast Conference, which is the same one as Gonzaga, but they don't get the recognition as Gonzaga because Gonzaga has had just a better runs in the tournament. So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting game. I think it's much like when UTSA plays another good G5 team. This is a very good mid-major team, and so I know that Coach Kalanch is just kind of getting his team together, and he's trying to build this program. It's going to be a nice test just to see if he's got some of the players he wants for this team.
Yeah, the other thing that kind of sticks out is that they're not playing Texas State. The women are. Coach Henson had Texas State's number, so it's interesting that they're not on the schedule. Hopefully they'll be on the non-conference schedule in the future, but
yeah, you'd hope that they could have come to an agreement, but maybe there's just
like
logistics
some kind of conflict,
just didn't work out. And I mean, that may happen, but that's got to be one of those games that you keep on the schedule, much like now football has, as we talked about earlier. So,
yep. Well, thanks for joining us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm A. Toves.
And I'm Toves.
We'll be back next week to recap our game against Texas.
I was wrong. It was a rivalry. Birds up.